Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Getting In, a college coach conversation. Here in New England, we have had what I call false summer for the past probably 7 days or so, and you can't tell from looking out the window behind me, that is definitely changing. And the reality is that it is absolutely fall. Thanksgiving is next week, so there is really no avoiding it. Shout out to seniors, Thanksgiving week. I know you're looking forward to maybe kicking back, but if you have not finished your applications, you could forget about that. You really need to keep working on them. The literally worst thing you could do is have a list of additional applications that you're going to send in if you don't get into your early schools, whatever those are. And there will be nothing worse than getting an answer in, say, mid-December and finding out that you were deferred or denied. And now you have to work on a bunch of applications at the very last minute. So take your Thanksgiving week and set aside some time for that then. We're answering your questions this week. That's what we're spending the second two segments on. But before we get to that, we're going to be looking at Notre Dame Supplement, which is reasonably involved. And joining me for that is Cara Courtois, who is my colleague here at College Coach. She's also a former admissions officer at Barnard College. But probably most importantly for our conversation today, she is a Notre Dame grad. So hi, Cara.
Hello, nice to see you.
You too. It's exciting to have you on the show. All right, so Notre Dame there are a lot of options. Students actually have to write 3 200-word essays. One is required, everyone's going to answer the same one. And then you have a choice of 5 additional options. Before we dig into them, very quickly, I wanted to get your sense of, it'd be helpful, I think, when you think about a place like Notre Dame, to think about what are the things that are important to them. And so maybe if you can give us a little bit of an overview, I think that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely a different place in many ways. I mean, so many similarities with many of the highly spirited campuses, highly selective schools, beautiful green campuses. But I think one thing I would boil it down into was thinking of willingness, that they're really looking for students who are willing to come to campus and maybe question life a little bit more deeply, and willing to push themselves beyond maybe their comfort zone of what they've known before. And that can look different in so many ways, whether you look at it through kind of spirituality and not necessarily religion. Though it's a Catholic school, they're really open to trying to encourage students just to be willing to question and explore, and in academics for sure, to push the boundaries of maybe what they've been comfortable with, and maybe fall in love with a whole new topic as well. So I would summarize it in saying they're really looking for willingness from their students.
Okay, that's good and important to keep in mind as we think about these other questions. All right, let's start with the one that everybody has to answer. And the question is, the founder of the Congregation of Holy Cross, Blessed Basil Moreau, wrote, or was it Basil? Did I pronounce that correctly?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's the honest answer.
Basil.
Yeah.
We shall always place education side by side with instruction. The mind will not be cultivated at the expense of the heart. How do you hope a Notre Dame education and experience will transform your mind and heart?
Yeah. I mean, I think for most students, I would try to simplify that to say, why do you want to go to Notre Dame?
Right.
Really, that
That's
might
really
be the simpler way to look at it,
Yes.
overall. And I think with any of these kinds of supplements, really just a bullet point, what jumps out, for you as the student is where I would start. Which, when it says transform, I think for some of the students, it's not necessarily total transformation. It's hopefully meeting you where you are, and hopefully the student can share some ways that their mind and heart has already sort of laid a foundation for their success at Notre Dame, but then also pointing to what speaks to them about that campus. I will say, for my own experience growing up going to public school my whole life, that what actually really spoke to me is the religious nature. I didn't know that it was necessarily the Catholic nature, and It was really the religious foundation, because I didn't know why I was Catholic. I really wasn't like feeling grounded in that. I was just listening to my parents,
Yeah.
at the time. And, um, and it really, I came there looking for some understanding of that. So, transformation maybe in that way. But it's going to look different for every student. So I encourage them, to think from their base of who they are to begin with, and how they are looking for Notre Dame, hopefully to grow that,
Right.
or maybe help them see something differently.
And I think, as with any Why This College essay, you want to be specific. So you
Yes.
mentioned bullet pointing out some key things. I don't think you suggesting that you include bullet points in your essay, but more that you do that research. These are the things I want to make sure I include, right? And
Hmm.
then including
Yeah.
that in the narrative essay.
Yeah. And I think part of that, I always love the About tab on a website,
Mhm.
because it usually either points you to the mission of that school in particular. And the mission at every school is slightly different,
Yes.
and especially in this age where students aren't necessarily able to walk on campus, which I think is so crucial to really understanding Notre Dame. I was really thinking about my last visit to campus, which was my 25th reunion, and um, and the layout of the campus. Everybody says, "Oh, it's stunning, it's beautiful," and I think now I'm really realizing that it's really set up to be contemplative, to
Mhm.
encourage students to walk across campus together and have conversations, to, like in the movie Rudy, maybe go for a walk, with, a priest or a nun on campus, and, think about your faith while you walk around the lakes. But it's really, set up in that way. So I feel badly for students who aren't able to see that, but that About tab, I think, helps. And then kind of the master tabs that they have on their website really guide you to the faith and the spirit of the campus.
Right, exactly. And no good Why This College essay ever happened without you going and doing some research. So unless you took great notes as you were doing your research to decide on where to apply, you need to start there. Okay,
Hmm.
let's go to the other options. So as I noted earlier, you have five options and you need to choose two. And as with the required one that everyone's going to write, each of these is going to be 200 words maximum. So you're going to write three 200-word, more or less, short answer essays. They're still essays. Let's start with option A. A Notre Dame education is not just for you, but also for those who will benefit from the impact you make. Who do you aspire to serve after you graduate?
Mm, that is that's such a big question. I
Yes.
would feel like some students really should skip right past that one. Quite honestly, the ones who really don't quite know an immediate response to that question. Um, because I mean, I just think you have to have a gut reaction to that. So just to say to many students who might be listening, that question may not be for everybody, really, and that's okay. There's plenty of other choices on there. Um, but they do have, I mean, when you look at the website, there's just so many options. And I will say a statistic from when I graduated was over 25% of our graduating class did service upon graduation. And that number is only growing there. I should have looked it up, but it's probably upwards of 40% now, to be honest, because their programs have expanded. So that's a big part of, they're not necessarily saying we're just going to send you out and expect you to get a job. And, so there's freedom, and you want to look at the website a little bit more, maybe to think about the fact that they're probably giving you some choices that could be really exciting. A program I did there was the Alliance for Catholic Education, which got me into teaching and got me, to stick with education the rest of my career so far. So um, there are great opportunities beyond just what's in career development, I would say.
Right, exactly. And I suppose that you could potentially talk about, I'm thinking about a student that I've worked with in the past who has combined science with
Mhm.
service and whose goals are to use her science acumen to
Mhm.
um, help make the world a better place, which sounds very
Mhm.
grandiose, and she
Mhm.
gets way more granular, which is what I would encourage you to do. And so I can
Exactly.
see, were she applying here, that might be a good one for her. But I want to second what you said right up front, which is if you are thinking, I have no idea and I'm going from Notre Dame to a job, and then just skip right past that. Okay. Option B. In response to the rising momentum behind the Black Lives Matter movement during June 2020, G. Marcus Cole, the Joseph A. Matson Dean of the Notre Dame Law School, penned an open letter entitled, "I am George Floyd, except I can breathe, and I can do something." He issues a call to the Notre Dame community saying, each of us must do what we can wherever we are. What is one action you are taking to, quote, to change this world for the better?
Yeah.
Big
And I think,
question.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I do think there's a lot of students who have a great response to this, based on what they've been able to do. I think some of those chances have been maybe curtailed because of COVID, but certainly there's other students maybe that have pivoted and are doing even something differently than they expected, that they didn't sit back and they're digging in to make a change through, oftentimes I'd say service, might be one of those pieces for sure. But to your point earlier, science research, there are many students who've been able to continue, their research projects. I'd also encourage students to keep it pretty simple in their thinking. That I know that I often say to students, do you help out in your family? And one of my current students, who's both his parents are doctors, and so um, he has been really monitoring the homework for his younger brother. And I said, you are making a difference, in your immediate family, in your brother's life, going forward. And, there's so many situations like that, that I would encourage students to, not necessarily have to think it's this grandiose, I started this nonprofit. Of course, there's plenty of room and wonderful students, doing that, but they might want to keep it simple too. Are you helping your next door neighbor get their groceries, during COVID, or, something pretty simple?
Yeah, and I also think an important point, I noted that you didn't specify, and I think that's important, is it doesn't have to be related to Black Lives Matter. If you're very involved in that, then awesome.
Yeah.
Then, that's something you can talk about. But there are a lot of different ways to talk about how you're changing the world, and I think that's a really good point. Okay, option C, God and the Good Life is an interdisciplinary course. I think I want to take that course. Created by the Departments of Philosophy and Film, Television, and Theater, that asks students to consider moral questions about what they believe and how they want to live their lives. What do God and a good life mean to you? Interesting.
Yeah. I would really encourage a student who, maybe hasn't seen themselves as particularly religious or, faith-based, or digging into that just yet, to don't jump over that question is what I would encourage, because I think there's pressure so often in these supplements or admissions applications that, what do the admissions counselor want to hear? And, we always encourage students truly to be just genuine, and there is no right or wrong. And so if you have a question, if you see that question and you think, I have no idea, you know, maybe start there, don't, discount the fact that they're not going to want to hear that, they actually, so often, the willingness is to maybe take a risk in sharing who you're, where you genuinely are in your journey. And we so often, say to students, as much as highly selective admissions is just really stressful and challenging and all of that, actually they all know that you're 17, typically, maybe 16 even, and know that you're really just starting the journey, and that, again, what willingness are you bringing? And maybe you can articulate some of that, of where you are in that, answering that question. So I'm sure students will have, even more pronounced experiences that they can speak directly to, and that's fine too. But I think for many students, I'd encourage, to pause on that question and not discount it because it has the word God, in it, or, something that seems a little daunting.
Right. I mean, I could see the 17-year-old you saying, this is maybe an opportunity for you to figure out, why am I Catholic? I'm not really sure what the role God is going to play in my life, because I haven't decided right now. My parents have decided for me. So cool.
Yeah, well said.
All right, option D, Notre Dame has a rich history deeply rooted in tradition. Share how a favorite tradition from your life has impacted who you are today. I would probably go right to this one.
Totally. I
This
think
totally speaks to me.
totally. I really think, a good number of students are really going to go, right there. And I would encourage them, to think of the who you are today part, making sure that 90% of that response is not just about that special, holiday or Christmas or, baking of the pies at Thanksgiving or whatever, it is, which is
Hmm.
wonderful and beautiful, but that should be a backdrop, and that it's very much focused on who you are today as a result of that tradition. So that can be a really fun show, don't tell, type of response. And I think I think Notre Dame would see a lot. I would
Yes.
agree. Yeah.
And probably some of the best is my guess,
Yeah. Very
would be
genuine.
those. Yes,
Hmm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, final option. What brings you joy?
Mhm.
Also kind of a nice one.
It's such a beautiful one, and especially, I'd say, in our world right now, a gift that some students who maybe aren't ready for some of those earlier, more heady responses might be able to shine pretty brightly, in there. And it's one more example of a space where there is absolutely no predicted answer there.
Right.
And I would encourage for every one of these responses, as we do for so many of the supplements, do a brain dump, jot down your initial thoughts and then walk away.
Hmm.
Maybe have it as a little, conversation with someone who knows you well, be it a peer, a teacher, a family member, but walk away, and do what we were talking before about the Notre Dame campus encourages contemplation. So think about it wherever
Yep.
your think space is and try to come back to it. So in other words, don't do it the week before it's due.
Exactly.
So and then, what brings you joy, you might be surprised, by what it is right now or, things that you hadn't necessarily thought in the last 6 months even.
Yeah, absolutely. Kara, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to take a short break. And when we get back, we're going to be answering your questions. So don't go away.